The neon lights of the city bled into streaks of cold blue as May stepped out of the office building. It was 8 p.m., the same time she had exited these doors every night for 3 years. She moved toward the subway station, her heels striking the concrete in a precise, rhythmic cadence that echoed against the glass towers. She did not look at the faces passing by. She did not look at the traffic. She focused only on the path. The subway ride was a blur of fluorescent flickers and the metallic screech of tracks. She walked the final 3 blocks to her building, her pace never wavering, never accelerating. She reached her apartment door, slid the key into the lock, and stepped into the dark. She moved to the table, set her bag down on the exact corner where it rested every night, and stood still. The silence in the room was absolute. It did not feel like peace. It felt like a vacuum. She looked at the wall, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. The air in the room was stagnant, pressing against her skin with the weight of 1,000 identical evenings. She remained motionless, staring at the blank wall until the shadows deepened. The silence was not empty. It was heavy, a physical weight pressing against her chest, making every breath feel like a deliberate effort. She moved to the desk, her fingers stiff as she opened her laptop. The screen glowed, illuminating her face with a harsh, artificial light. She scanned her inbox, clicking through emails that demanded nothing more than her time and her compliance. She closed the lid. The screen went dark, and the question settled into her mind like a low, vibrating hum. Is this all there is? The room suddenly felt too small, the walls closing in with the familiarity of a cage. She stood up, her chair scraping harshly against the floor. She grabbed her coat from the back of the door, her movements sharp and uncoordinated. She did not look back at the bag on the table. She pulled the door open, stepped into the hallway, and walked toward the stairs. She stepped out into the night, leaving the suffocating stillness behind. She walked past the subway entrance, her feet instinctively pulling toward the stairs she had descended for years. She stopped. The rhythm of her stride faltered, a momentary hitch in the mechanical precision of her night. She looked at the familiar path, then looked left, toward the narrow, unlit alleyway that led to the old district. She turned. The transition was immediate. The harsh, flickering blue of the city's streetlights gave way to a soft, pulsing amber. The air here was different. It did not carry the metallic tang of exhaust or the sterile scent of ozone. Instead, it held the heavy, grounding smell of damp earth and cedar. She walked deeper into the maze of cobblestone streets, her pace slowing as the frantic hum of the city faded into a dull, distant murmur. The buildings here were low, their windows glowing with warm, golden light. She felt the tension in her shoulders begin to loosen, the tight, suffocating pressure in her chest replaced by the cool, night air. She rounded a corner and saw the silhouette of a sprawling banyan tree. May stopped at the edge of the banyan tree's shadow, the roots twisted deep into the earth, anchoring the massive trunk against the night. Beneath the canopy, a low wooden table sat undisturbed. An elderly man occupied the space behind it, his posture so rigid and still he could have been part of the tree itself. A single clay teapot rested between 2 empty cups. May felt her pulse thrumming in her throat, a frantic, irregular beat that seemed too loud for the quiet street. The man looked up. His eyes were clear, dark, and utterly devoid of the confusion that had plagued her for months. He did not speak. He simply gestured to the empty stool opposite him with a slow, deliberate movement of his hand. May hesitated, her weight shifting from one foot to the other. Instead, she stepped forward and sat. The wood of the stool was cool and solid beneath her. The man reached for the teapot. His hands were steady, lacking even the slightest tremor of age. He lifted the pot, the clay smooth and dark, and began to pour. The sound of the liquid hitting the cup was crisp and rhythmic. May watched the steam rise in thin, graceful ribbons, coiling into the night air. The liquid hit her tongue, sharp and bitter, before settling into a lingering, honeyed sweetness. May set the cup down. The ceramic clicked against the wood, a sound that felt too loud in the stillness. She looked at the man, but he remained motionless, his gaze fixed on the steam. She opened her mouth, then closed it. "I have done everything right," she started, her voice thin and brittle. "I have the job, the routine, the plan. I follow the schedule to the minute." She gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles whitening. "But I feel like I am running on a treadmill that is moving backward. I push, I sweat, I exhaust myself. And yet I am further behind than when I started. Her voice cracked, a sharp, involuntary sound. She felt the heat rising in her face. The raw, stinging reality of her failure laid bare in the quiet air. The old man did not look up. He did not blink. He simply kept his hand steady on the handle of the clay pot, tilting it further even as the tea reached the brim of the cup. May watched, frozen, as the dark liquid crested the edge. It did not stop. It cascaded over the side, a steady, relentless stream that soaked the wooden surface of the table. The smell of cedar and damp earth intensified, mingling with the sharp, bitter scent of the tea. May's heart hammered against her ribs. She reached out, her fingers twitching, wanting to stop the waste. "Stop!" she cried, her voice cutting through the quiet. "It is overflowing." The old man ignored her, his eyes fixed on the point where the stream met the wood. He set the pot down only when the puddle had reached the edge of the table, threatening to drip onto her lap. He looked at her then, his face unreadable. "Exactly," he replied. His voice was calm, devoid of judgment. "You come to me seeking wisdom, but your mind is already full of your own noise. How can I pour anything into a cup that is already overflowing?" May stared at the spreading puddle, her breath shallow. The old man leaned back, his movements slow and deliberate. He did not offer a cloth or a word of comfort. Instead, he pointed a gnarled finger toward the ground near her feet. A tiny, pale, green sprout pushed through a jagged crack in the stone. It was fragile, barely an inch tall. Yet, it held its place. The man watched it, then looked at her. "You are trying to command the river to flow faster," he said. "But the river does not care for your schedule. It simply flows." He gestured to the sprout again. "The tree does not rush to become tall. It drinks the rain. It waits for the sun. It grows because it is its nature to grow." May looked down. She had walked past this stone a dozen times, never noticing the life struggling beneath it. The tension in her shoulders began to dissipate. She was not failing. She was simply out of sync with the world around her. The old man stood up, his movements slow and deliberate, and turned back toward the shadows of the banyan tree. May stood as well, her legs feeling lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from her joints. She walked back toward her apartment, but she did not look at her watch. She did not check the time. She did not think about the list of tasks waiting for her tomorrow. She simply walked, listening to the sound of her own footsteps. The city lights were still there, but they no longer felt like a blur of pressure. The next morning, she arrived at her office. She did not attempt to overhaul her career or quit in a dramatic gesture. She sat at her desk, pulled a report toward her, and focused on the first line. She wrote one sentence, then another. She felt the heavy weight of expectation lift from her chest. She was not rushing to finish. She was not racing against a clock. She was simply working. She was exactly where she needed to be. Weeks passed, and the change took root in the small, quiet corners of her day. Every Tuesday evening, she sat in a studio, brush in hand, watching colors bleed into one another on canvas. She stopped trying to control the outcome, and instead watched the paint move. On her lunch breaks, she walked through the park, no longer checking her phone for incoming messages or missed deadlines. She sat on wooden benches and watched the sunlight filter through the leaves. When colleagues asked why she was not moving faster on certain projects, she no longer felt the sharp sting of inadequacy. She did not apologize. She simply explained the status of the work and returned to her desk. The frantic, internal noise that had once felt like a cage had completely dissolved. It was replaced by a steady, quiet rhythm that matched the world around her. She realized that she was not behind, nor was she lost. She was exactly where she needed to be. She stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker, and for the first time, the water felt warm against her skin.